have a little conversation afterwards. So just up front, what we did was go to Palestine for 3 weeks, 2 weeks of which was with this delegation with community peacemaker teams. It was February 14th through the 26th, almost, well, yeah, a month ago. And the interview we did with Mona was just this past Saturday. It was March 15th. So it's pretty up to speed about what's happening there currently, although what we talked a lot about was, somewhat at least, was our delegation. So with no further ado, I'm just going to start the video because it takes an hour, and then we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. Melody, did you need to, or would you like to say anything about the video?
No, except that I would just say that in an hour's time we weren't able to cover all the topics we wanted to, so hopefully you'll have some questions afterwards about what's spoken about in the video, but also anything else that you might have questions about.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to share screen, and hopefully the next thing you'll see will be the video. Okay. Well, hi, Mona, and welcome to the War Industry Resistors Network, and thanks for being here. Appreciate you so much. And let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Thank you for having me.
So we also have Melody Shank here and myself, Ken Jones. And for the sake of our viewers, we'll let you know that we met Mona in Palestine, and now we're doing a follow-up to a delegation that we did with CPT there. So Mona, can you start us off by just explaining what CPT, Community Peacemaker Teams, is and your role in it?
So Community Peacemaker Teams, it's an organization that's been founded in the 80s, and it started as Christian Peacemaker Teams, and then we changed to Community Peacemaker Teams. The idea is how we can resist and support people using nonviolence in terms of dismantle oppression in different communities. So we do a lot of accompaniment, documenting, and advocacy. And the good thing about CPT that we don't go wherever we want. We need to be invited to those communities by community leaders who thinks they need our support in it. So CPT Hebron started in 1996, actually after a group of people from Hebron, mainly the municipality, extended the invitation to CPT Palestine to come to Hebron. And the idea was to stay 6 months. But clearly violence didn't decrease by any means. Actually, it increased. So down the years, we built a lot of partnerships. We worked with different communities in Hebron, whether in Hebron, the city, Al-Khalil in Arabic, Al-Khalil, whether in South Hebron Hills. So we do work in the area where people ask us for. We have different teams in the world. So we have in Colombia, we have in Iraqi Kurdistan, we have in Greece, and we have in Turtle Island as well.
Yeah, good. And how long have you been with CPT, and what's your role?
So I started in CPT as an intern in 2011. By 2012, I became a member, a full member. In 2015, I became the coordinator for the team, and now I'm finishing my work with CPT. It will be my last year.
Oh, they're gonna miss you.
I will remain as a reservist, but not as a worker anymore. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Melody, would you like to say anything about your experience with CPT?
Sure. I grew up in the Church of the Brethren, and I knew about CPT many years ago, and actually know of some members of at least early teams, and one person I know was on the original CPT team in Hebron. And I am not a reservist. I guess I'm considered an intern, although I went with Ken to two places. Ken is a reservist, and we went to the Arizona-Mexico border and accompanied asylum seekers for a couple of weeks. And we also went to Line 3 in Minnesota when indigenous people were fighting the oil pipeline that was being built in through their land and through farmland. So it was a collaboration between indigenous people and people, European Americans who were on the ground trying to fight that pipeline going through under the Mississippi River and across many, many lands. So that's
So
my
yeah,
experience.
and my involvement is that I actually went to the training, month-long training in Colombia in 2019. So I'm considered a reservist. And so, as Melody said, we went to the border in Arizona, and we've also been to Minnesota. And now this time we went on as part of a delegation to Palestine. So what we want to do is get into talking about what the realities are in the West Bank, in particular in Hebron. And there are different aspects of it that we want to cover. And Mona, you're the best situated. I mean, you've been there all these years. You live there. I know you're not from there, but you've lived there all these years. But maybe we can give an initial impression, which is just the tip of the iceberg from our delegation, and then you can come right back and tell a little more in depth about what it's like and correct us if you need to.
I will.
Okay, so I made a couple of little dots here about the things we ought to cover, a couple of little bullet points, and I know that we want to talk about the surveillance in Hebron. We want to talk about the checkpoints, not just Hebron, West Bank as well. Settlers, we were there when they shut schools down. The infrastructure, we were there when the electricity got shut down on a daily basis. And at some point, I want to get us to talk about Maser Yatta too. So, Melody, do you want to have a first crack at talking about those kind of things?
Well, I just, as you were reading them, I thought, oh, we should talk about another one, which is the sort of the imprisonments and the arrests that take place on a fairly regular basis for Palestinians. And I was actually thinking about the personal aspect that we learned about while we were in Hebron and in Bethlehem. Our delegation started in Bethlehem. We spent most of our time in Hebron and ended in Jerusalem. And I think the assault on Palestinians that seem for many just to be random is something that Americans, I don't think, actually do know about how frequent houses are raided and people are taken, and we can use the personal experience of the team members who were our delegation leaders. Along with Mona, there were four other people on the team who did the primary leading of our delegation. And if I have a lovely picture of them on one of our last nights there and in Hebron, and as I look at them, I know that at least for three of them, what their own personal family experiences are with being sort of randomly being picked out and homes raided and imprisonment. Two of them who were sisters, their father was in prison for, I think, 14 years as a young man, and another team member, I don't know the details, but I know at least four of his brothers were in prison or are in prison. Maybe Mona, you can correct that. And I know Mona has her own personal story, and we heard many stories from the families that we met, individuals we met, about the randomness of the IOF coming into their homes at night and, terrorizing the whole family. And arresting some members, or if not all members of families. And those stories are some of the hardest to hear because they are so personal. They seem not, yeah, they're not caused by anything. They're random, and the whole family is terrorized, and it might be terrorized over and over again. Just like since we got home, we heard a story about a family who the IOF raided and arrested, people, prisoners who had been released probably as part of the ceasefire deal. So those are very, very personal, and the trauma affects every person in the family. Little children, fathers, grandfathers, young women. We heard from 2 young women who had been taken to prison, and their lives are wrecked basically by those experiences. So I'll start there.
No, that's good. I think I'll pass for a moment and just let you speak, Mona. Tell us what it's like living there with all this stuff going on, this occupation that's bearing down on all of you from every direction.
So as a Palestinian, we lived under this occupation that controls every aspect in our lives. And when I say every aspect, sometimes it's the small things that we don't know if we wake up in the morning, it will be easy for us to go to the work, example, because they might close all the checkpoints. This is something, I guess, in the world, people don't think really about because they will wake up and go to their jobs. So we do. So a lot of people, example, if they work out of the city and they want to come to the city of Hebron, they really now need to come sometimes an hour in advance to make sure even if the checkpoint is closed, they can reach their job. So that become one of the realities that we think, oh, it's the easiest among other realities. The fact to live day in and day out, you don't know what would happen at all. This unpredictability make it hard for us to plan anything in our lives. So we cannot plan like, oh, in this month I want to travel. That's not easy because at some point they will close also the borders to go, and the only way to travel for us is to go through Jordan, and the borders are controlled by the Israelis. To go to walk, in example, in the old city of Hebron, and out of nowhere you have patrol of soldiers just patrolling to either terrify the people or just to make sure that everybody knows that they are in control. To grow up, I always think about the kids there, to grow up all your life, this is your scenery in life, is not easy. So I always remember I used to monitor one of the checkpoints, and I knew a girl, I knew her when she was in the kindergarten, going to the kindergarten, and she needed to pass a checkpoint. So I used to walk with her and we became friends. Now she is in her last year of school. She still passes the same checkpoint. The checkpoint changed from a turnstile to a really upgraded checkpoint where there is a room to be checked, where there is a turnstile, where there is a block, like kind of a fence, like a wooden fence that whatever happens inside you cannot see anyway. This girl, she grew up just passing this checkpoint just to go to school. So from age 1 to age now she's 16 or 17, she passed the same checkpoint. This is a reality that I don't think anybody can comprehend unless they see what we're talking about. Because a lot of questions come, oh, but why there is a checkpoint? But they let them pass. Okay, they let them pass, but the idea of having a checkpoint is the problem. It's not that they let them pass. The other reality after October 7, if you have in your house a guy in their 20s, they under the threat of arrest. That's it. You need to be prepared mentally, emotionally, that at some point they will be arrested. no reason, or for any excuse. And you will not hear from them for a while. You cannot visit them anyway. So it's only through lawyers. So that's another reality that we need to face. To go from city to city is really harder than before, really harder. Like you need to plan that minimum 3 hours of your life will be in a taxi waiting just to pass. So example, from Hebron to Beit Lahem in ordinary day, it will take 45 minutes to 1 hour. Because of that checkpoint, sometimes it takes 2 hours or 3 hours just because they blocked it. The fact that now the daily raids in different areas, the settler violence that increased drastically in specific areas, and we know they're immune, like they can do whatever, and everybody knows, and all the media knows. Still, they're immune. It's part of, you know, the realities we face. The fact that a lot of, if you talk to Palestinians, they will tell you they're scared of settlers more than soldiers. That says a lot. So for me, it just to plan anything, you need to keep all these things in mind. All these things. A pregnant woman might, like a lot of pregnant women would like just give birth at checkpoint, or they will not allow them to pass, or so you never know. After October 7 as well, you can see how fast soldiers react. Example, using live ammunition. You could see it, that was like it changed. Through the years, in my experience, you could see the difference. Example, when Trump won the first election, his first time, how things changed on the ground in terms of checkpoints and the attitude at the checkpoints by the soldiers. So everything is like our daily life should be planned according to all these changes that happen minute to minute. It's not like, oh, in the coming week, like we don't know. And then Gaza is a totally different story. Like realities in Gaza, totally different stories. They face death. They've been facing death since ever, whether by the Israelis were calculating their calories to get the food based on calories per person, till what happened being killed live on TVs and nobody said anything. And when I say nobody, I don't blame only the world. Also, I blame part of me blames us as Palestinian in the West Bank. So everybody is blamed to see this thing, and we did not do anything.
I know. I just want to make a comment about the checkpoints because Melanie and I went there 10 years ago, and we actually traveled on public transportation and watched as people were crammed into these cages. We didn't have to go because we have white privilege, and U.S. passport privilege, which I'd like you to talk about in a minute. We'll get to white privilege here in a second because we felt it. We knew it. We were waved on whenever they saw us. We weren't challenged. We could go through checkpoints. We could go to the Ibrahimi Mosque. We could go to Youth Against Settlements. Anyway, we felt the white privilege, but it is really a gut-wrenching experience to see Palestinians crammed into these cages, these fenced-in areas, as they are led in one by one or maybe by twos or threes to have themselves interrogated or checked out by, an Israeli soldier behind a glass wall, in a glass booth. It's really a deliberate attempt to humiliate Palestinians on a daily basis. And we saw it, and anybody who hasn't seen pictures or videos of the checkpoints should have a look at what that looks like. We also, you mentioned the settlers and how people are more afraid of the settlers sometimes than they are of the soldiers. Of course, the soldiers back them up, so the settlers are free to feel violent and are violent, I think, often.
And are armed. They're armed.
And they're armed, they carry weapons. So what we didn't get to see, we were on our schedule. We had this schedule of, places to go to accompany kids to school. And, as I said, the schools were shut down at that time. But we were supposed to see this thing called a weekly incursion from Tal Rameda into Hebron, and I have seen pictures of it. Can you describe, I mean, this is a weekly event of these settlers parading through the old city of Hebron, accompanied by soldiers, and I don't know if all the shops, but a lot of the shops close up because they're going to be harassed by the settlers. Can you kind of give us a little picture of what that looks like for you all as you see it happen?
So okay, the first time I ever saw the settler incursion in H2, I guess that was the first time I ever saw was in 2011. And I remember I cried when I saw it because it was so weird for me to see it. So usually it's every Saturday and in some specific Jewish holidays where settlers will be out accompanied by border police and police usually. And they will walk through the old city with the tour guide telling them about the history and this place belongs to them, etc. During the walk, they will stop Palestinians from walking. So example, today when it happened, literally, they stopped people and told them, you need to stay in that area for 5 minutes till we go inside the military base. So people were not allowed to move. Some shops would be closed because a lot of times they would just break something or hassle people. In history, I remember when they kind of push a CPT and their camera fell down. So nobody is really immune in this during that time. And I think part of it as an activity they do weekly is just to remind the Palestinian they will never have time without their presence in it, and everything belongs to them, and to show them that they are immune in all means, to reclaim the place in this way. So it's one of the, for me, and whenever I did orientation for people before they do the monitoring for this activity for the incursion, I always told them that this is one of the weird duties you will ever do, because everybody is looking at everybody. Everyone is looking at everyone. Settlers looking at Palestinian, soldiers looking at Palestinian and settler, we monitoring settlers and the Palestinian. It's just like everyone is looking at everyone, and you just need to be really observant to make sure what is happening. Sometimes it's weird when we describe these things, because I will say sometimes it goes smooth, but nothing is smooth about it. But it goes uneventful. And sometimes it would be like kind of like especially verbal violence most of the time. In my time doing it, I always find it more scary when it's more youth groups, mainly young men coming, because they'll be more like energetic and want to make a point. But it will remain one of the weirdest duties I ever did in CPT. To know that you're going to a duty and we all looking at each other.
Yeah, and it's meant to be threatening, I suppose, to Palestinians. I mean, it must feel that way. They all felt, I mean, the team that we were with felt like they were used to this, right? Like it's become, I hate to say normalized, but it's sort of like you live with this stuff all your life, and maybe you don't feel threatened, or maybe you do. And I don't know if you do or not by all this.
But okay, I would say one thing. I don't see it normal by any means, but you learn how to deal with your stress down the years with such a thing. But sometimes it still will remain scary. It's a lot of weapons around you anyway. And in history, also they used to have a police dog with them. And cultural wise, people have problem with dogs anyway. I don't know why, but cultural wise, that the dog is like quote unquote dirty or whatever. I love animals, that's why. But also they will threat people with that dog. So it's threatening. But also you're talking with people who it's not normalization as much as you see them every day. You see them every day. Like, yes, after October 7, people were more scared of them, comparing it than before, example.
Yeah.
So I think it depends how we define normalization, and also, so we don't act like, oh, we're like, we're for me, I know that in the old city, man, in Hebron, some stuff is normalized because it's day in and day out.
Yeah.
So part of it, and people get angry with me when I say that, because sometimes people think, oh, it's resilience and all that. Part of it is resilience, yes. And we're resilient. That's true. But part of it is not, is the fact that we can, like, this is the abnormal normal for us.
Yeah.
Way to put it.
Go ahead, Melody, you want to jump in?
No, I was just going to say that's a good way to put it, the abnormal normal. You have to continue to live your lives, right? And that's partly resilient and that's partly not acceptance of it, but knowing that it's the normal day-to-day kind of activities that you might experience. I just wanted to add, in the event that people don't know what the situation in the city of Hebron is that Hebron, the city of Hebron is the only place where settlers live inside. There are settlements inside the city. Most Israeli settlements are, big, or small, some size of a settlement outside, outside cities or on the edge of cities. But in Hebron, there are actually settlements inside, and I'm not sure I'm going to get the numbers right, but I think there are 800 settlers that live inside Hebron. And it means that they're very close in proximity to the many, many, many Palestinians that live in the old city, specifically. So the IOF and settlers themselves are protecting those people from protecting them to have homes, basically. They were mostly stolen, right, Mola? They were stolen. They were taken from Palestinians, the homes. Most of them.
In the settlement in the old city. Hala, if you want to go to the history back the days, part of the settlements where they took used to be the Jewish quarter in history. But still, a lot of Jewish who lived in that area after they took it as settlements and it became settlements. The original Jewish who lived there said they don't have any connection with those settlers. So when you ask someone or you check about it, they will tell you, oh, this is for our grandparents or whatever, which is not true. Yani, most of the settlers in the old city of Hebron, mostly we have several groups. We have the political religious groups. Mostly they are from the US actually. And then we have the people who they get benefited from being in settlements because they get paid and they get so not all of them coming from like the ideology. So some of them is the ideology, pure ideology, and this is our land. Some of them is because they get all the support to live in such areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. I also wanted just to add some of the things that Mona didn't talk about that I observed in terms of the daily life that people might it'd be good for people to understand is the cutting off of electricity for a couple hours a day in sort of a rolling way, right, around the city. We experienced that, but pretty soon you'd be planning something and the electricity would go off. One day we were going to watch a movie one afternoon, just the people that were on the delegation, and we were all ready, and pretty soon the electricity goes out. So, we had to change our plans, and our team was always saying they had to have plan B. And they did that day. We all got in taxis and tried to find a place in the city where we could go to have coffee and work. And also the water. I mean, water is not something that Palestinians have on a regular basis. And something that I learned on this delegation that I didn't know before, that if a building or a house has a water tank on it, it means it's owned by Palestinians, or Palestinians live there. And Israelis don't need to have water tanks on their roofs because they have direct access to, sort of central access to water, and Palestinians do not. And I was going to say one other thing about that. Anyway. Oh, and also about Shahada Street. Maybe you can talk about Shahada Street. That is now, we walked down Shahada Street twice, completely a ghost town. And actually, most of some of the old city, most of the old city is also a ghost town because so many businesses have left. So maybe Shahada Street would be something you could describe, Mona?
And let me
Yes,
add before you go, Mona, is that we were able to walk down the street, but the Palestinians were not.
Yeah.
oh, of course.
Another example of our white privilege.
Just I would like to invite people when they have time to read about the water agreement that it's connected to Oslo Agreement, which it will say a lot about the water situation and how much, like in comparison, like per individual, the usage of water. I mean, the whole agreement is weird, but when you go into details, it becomes more weirder even. Shohada Street. So Shohada Street is the main street in Hebron that connects Hebron and the south of Hebron together. And it was the main road. It was the main road for the city in terms of market, in terms of taxi, how we call it, station. Then it was closed. So after the massacre in 1995, the old city was closed for a couple of months, but then was reopened. There was obstacles, but still Shuhada Street was open. In the second Intifada, Shuhada Street was closed. And saying it was closed for the Palestinian. And it's considered to be a felony/crime if you as a Palestinian walk in Shuhada Street, but settlers can walk. Though we're talking about Palestinian living in that area, that would make their life way easier if they can use the street, but we can't. And that talks a lot about how the world, generally speaking, divide people into the better race or the best race and the underneath. If I recall right, by court order, it should be open. So it's by military order that it's closed as a street. So we're not allowed to walk through. So whenever people, like when you came to Palestine as a delegation, before October 7, at least we used to be able to cross the checkpoint and walk with you a little bit to a certain point that we're allowed. But now even to go into the checkpoint is not it's not allowed all the time. One thing that happened before October 7 in 2015, if I recall right, they closed the checkpoints and they gave people numbers as residents. So if you have this number, you can pass the checkpoint. They did that again after October 7. So if you don't have this number, you're not a resident, you cannot go in. And that's, I think, another way to segregate families from each other and isolate communities. So Shuhada Street is kind of segregation, is indeed segregation that we cannot use. After it was closed, more than 500 shops were closed. So we're talking about people losing their livelihood. So it's not only a road. It's a road. It's families getting disconnected. It's people losing their jobs, their livelihood. The graveyard is in that area, so even it's hard to go if you want to. I don't know how you say it in English, but if you want to go and visit the dead person you love, you can't.
That's the
You
way to
can't.
say it. Yeah.
Because you can't, because it's not easy. So example, in our holy, like Eid al-Adha example, after Ramadan, we have the holiday. It's called Eid al-Adha. A lot of people try to go and visit like whoever dead in their families and put flowers, read Quran for them. In that graveyard, people are scared to go or pay their like love for the people or clean even the grave in around them. So it's not only a road, and this is what I like people to picture. It's not a road, because as Palestinian, the only thing I know as a fact that if they close one road, we find another road. So this is not only a road, it's a road, it's a livelihood, it's family. So yeah.
So it sounded like it was the center of culture and, and economics that,
It was the main road because it was the main road to
and
the heart of the old city.
and it connects to Tel Remeda, which is a community that's up a hill, right? That, um, and I just wanted to add to the story about the graveyard, just so that people know that Palestinians have to get a permit to be able to have a funeral, right? Or to have people at the funeral, right?
Yes.
So you can't even go and plan to have a funeral without lots of planning. And for Muslims anyway, it means, I mean, the custom is that the body needs to be in the ground fairly quickly. So there is no planning. You can't have a funeral.
And one of the things they used in terms of like talking about dead bodies and how also they try to humiliate Palestinian in terms of their religious rituals in 2015 until now, till now, they do hold the dead bodies for years. So in 2015, I remember when they held, at least from Hebron, more than 8 bodies, and the family kept having like a tent as a solidarity, as a families, they sit together till the bodies were released, and there was a closure finally for the families to bury their kids, their children. It was one of the hardest things I did ever in my life. Yeah.
I can testify about the roads being closed, creating such a problem, the blockades. We were just trying to go from one place to another to the schools, and we could have gone straight to the school to watch these kids, but instead the roads were blocked off, and it took us, what did it take us, Melody, like 45
minutes? I think so.
Yeah, to get to the school, when it might have taken 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just a common occurrence. That they do it permanently sometimes, I guess, but they do it just on the spot. Just close the street down and make you go around the long way. It's just deliberate daily attempts to make life really hard to live there, I think, is what it is. I wonder, I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about Massacre Yatta if you feel like it, Mona. We went there on the delegation to the little village of Al-Khair. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And it was the day after a home had been demolished. And Melody and I have also seen the film No Other Land, which is about Massacre Yatta and the deliberate attempt to get rid of villages there and settlements nearby and military bases, the organized, systematic attempt to push people out of their villages. And so we saw it firsthand, and I know that you must know a lot about it. So you feel like talking a little bit about Massacre Yatta?
So Masafer Yatta and other areas in the West Bank, like the Jordan Valley and other areas, all those areas are like under the threat either of full demolition or more restriction. Masafer Yatta, I mean, as you saw, it's small villages, not really close to each other. Some of them, even the houses are not real houses, either it's caves or tents. So we're not talking about houses like solid houses or anything, but that's their life, that's their livelihood, that's their, lives. And it's under the threat, almost all Masafir Yatta under the threat of demolition, and the settler violence is increased a lot drastically after October 7. In 2012 also, they declared Masafir Yatta as a military training zone. So soldiers will have random days of training, and they would ask people to leave the area in this training. And you can check, I guess it was called 912 zone. You can check it. CPT worked also with the community around that time about the military zone that they created. Till now, they do trainings every now and then. So they make it harder for people to live, to be honest. And that's why, like, when you go and ask people how they're doing and all that, they say this is their land and they need to stay there. But in the other hand, also so example, in some areas, they let the young people go to Yatta and live in Yatta, and the older people stay in the Masafir Yatta, so they keep the land and keep it safe. So people start, like, it started to get them, but people are still there. And they're really cooperative and they really coordinate together. Masafir Yatta, I think, is the micro example of the macro ideas of, like, خلاص, we don't need Palestinians anymore. Yalla bye, Palestinians. And to be honest, we need also, as Palestinians, to work more on our organization in terms of how we can do solidarity with each other in more efficient way. Because I cannot keep saying, where are the people, when sometimes you would ask someone about Palestinian person about Masafir Yatta or the old city, and they say, oh, I never visited there. That's a whole another issue, of course. So I guess Jordan Valley is the same idea. They want to take the lands. In terms of Masafir Yatta is the sheep and this type of work. In Jordan Valley is agriculture and planting, and they want so they want everything, and they can't come up with any excuse. So either this place belonged to them or this place was empty, and so it's a daily, especially in South Hebron Hills, it's a daily hassle, to be honest. You would wake up one day and realize that settlers burnt the car, and this car is the only car that served that community, example. So the last car that was burned, it is the only car that take children to the school or take sick people to the hospital or whatever. So we're talking about day in and day out. You never know what would happen, especially we're talking about remote areas. It's not easy to get there. Even if there's no occupation, it's not easy to get there because the roads are not easy to drive through. It's a bit remote. So I guess settlers are really using this. So most of the time, the incidents would happen at night. So nobody can.
Right. Yeah. Melody, you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to describe al-Khair just as so people that understand how it goes about. As Mona said, that Israel will declare it a military training zone or put a military base there, that then gives them the rationale for wanting to displace a village like al-Khair. When we arrived, there had just been an incident with not only the demolition of a house the day before, but there had been an incident with some settlers that morning, and the police were called, and the police are like, don't bother us with this. And the settlers, I think they were young men, had, planted an Israeli flag in the village, or at least on the edge of the village. But the physical situation of the village just made me understand what they're facing on a regular basis. So here's the village. the young village, the person that we talked to, said his family had been moved from someplace in the Negev. They bought the land that they were on. And so they had a claim to that land and a settlement. So we're talking about a hilly area that doesn't hurt, that has very little, there's not development. There aren't lots of people living there. Most, as you looked out over the hills, it was mostly rolling hills that didn't have houses on them that I could see anyway. And so you have this village, and right next to it is a settlement that was built there, and quite a large one. I couldn't see all of it, but there's a road in, it goes around, sort of goes around the village. So that's a barrier to this small village. And behind, on the other side, the villagers have, or somebody's raising chickens. So they have multiple chicken houses that also put a border on it. They've been told that the road that goes into the village and to the settlement is their boundary. And the day we were there, on one of the other sides, the Jewish National Fund, which has a plant a tree program, was either the settlers or somebody from that program were planting trees right up against the village. So basically that village is completely boxed in by Israeli funded, Israeli led boundaries. And they've had all kinds of situations. Mona's right. No, their water was, attacked. They're not allowed to graze their sheep. They're just completely boxed in. They've been dealing with, we didn't hear this while we were there, but when I got home, I found a website and it was like, they've been dealing this with for decades. I mean, this is their situation for decades now. And they've been doing, all kinds of creative things to try to sustain themselves and to maintain their land. There was a playground and some other things that were sort of in the village that international organizations had helped them build. They were thinking already about what they can do, which is one thing was to have a master plan for the village that they thought might help them save their land. So this is their daily, right? And they have lots of international people come there because that's another strategy, is to have international people like us, and there were several other groups there that day, small groups, to try to be present. So that, as a sort of maybe, hopefully a little bit of a buffer.
Now, let me put a plug in for that movie again, No Other Land. Have you seen it, Mona?
Not really. So why not really? Because while I'm in Palestine, I don't watch anything about Palestine.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
You're living it. You are
This is
living it.
my strategy for my mental health.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that.
it's finally getting a little bit of distribution in the outside of big cities in the United States, which is good. It's actually coming to Asheville where we live, so next week.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So we've been at it here for about 45 minutes, and I'm thinking we could have a couple more topics to talk about and then call it quits. So one topic, Mona, I wanted you to we talked about when we were there, and I was interested to get you to revisit the conversation. And there's the topic about peace versus liberation. And so we had this conversation in one of our CPT reflections, and some of us were saying we need a nonviolent approach to changing things, and what we're hoping for is peace and all that. And someone, it might have been you, said, well, our word that we use is liberation, more than we use the word peace. And of course, Community Peacemaker Teams has peace in it. So there's sort of a tension there between peace and liberation, I suppose. And I wonder if is something you could speak to, that issue about liberation and peace and how they play against each other.
So for me, especially when you think about the situation here, when you talk and discuss with people, about peace and all that, they think about peace in terms of like peace meaning like, okay, maybe no checkpoints or no soldiers, but they don't talk really about equality and equity. And it feels like this fake peace that is just we're living and we're having our daily life and we go to cafes and this is peace. This for me is not peace. And liberation should come from within. So I think first we need to liberate ourselves, and then we can go through the full liberation, thinking about equality and equity. And other than that, it's not either liberation or peace. Because even if we go in the history of the peace talks or whatever you want to call it, peace to whom? Peace to get the approval from whom? We've never been standing on the same footing to say about peace. So if you talk to me about peace, get me in the same footing of the other person, then maybe we can talk about peace. Other than that, it's not. And this is what people always try to, why you don't think about peace? Why you don't think about talking to a settler? It's not that. It's like, why would I talk to someone who even doesn't think I'm a human? So for me, I'm tired of using words just to satisfy mainly white people in the conversation. And as I said, even nonviolence is a privilege when especially white people talk about it. And for me, we need as Palestinians to stop this fear of speaking up our mind, because the white person will think we are, oh my God, bad people. I don't care anymore, to be honest. I don't care because I know where I'm standing. I know that peace is not equal to liberation. I know peace is not equal to justice. I'm not going to use this word, and I don't use it anyway. And I know in CPT, community peacemaker teams, our piece in CPT is what I'm talking about. So it's not about like looking and, smiling and think we're in peace.
Yeah, well said.
So Mona, I know that we had a little bit of discussion in our delegation, but that when CPT changed from Christian peacemaking teams to community peacemaking teams, was there conversation about changing the word peace?
No.
Okay.
No, the conversation was always about, and we call it the conversation around the sea. So that was the main conversation.
Which was a step forward, but
yeah. Sorry, say it again.
I said it was a step forward to change it away from Christian.
Because we became more open to other people, and Christian, in terms of the word, in some teams created a problem with the indigenous people we're serving, actually.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of details in it. And I guess if people want to know more, it's written in our website, the reason why we changed the Christian to community.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So maybe last topic, or maybe two more last topics. Mona, you're a psychologist and you work with people's trauma. You are, I guess, a therapist for people who are going through trauma. Would you talk a little bit about your work and the kind of trauma that you see that people are experiencing there?
So I do work with people, and a lot of time it's about the traumas. Lately, to be honest, a lot of the people I deal with is people who really traumatized by either the house raids they have, or by the like what they watched on TV regarding Gaza, or bypassing a checkpoint. And then there is, so this is the common trauma you will find. But then there's their own traumas in their own houses and how they deal with it. So this is what always make me feel kind of stressed about that the world think our trauma is only occupation. We have, of course, the trauma from occupation. It's constant, it's daily. And that's why I refuse to say, oh, it's PTSD. It's not PTSD. It's continuous trauma that we will give to our children anyway. But then there's our own individual traumas that is connected to our own stories in it. So it's sad to see it. And it's increasing, and anxiety is increasing. And then you need to navigate how to deal with it, being in the same environment and in the same traumas with people. So hopefully I'm helping people, to be honest.
I'm sure you are.
So it's hard, especially that part of you sometimes would feel like this is the normal reaction to what is happening. And sometimes I feel like I want to get all the children, especially children, and get them to live with me. But then it will be weird because I will have a lot of kids in my house. But yeah, sometimes I really feel like I want to take all the kids.
I
Because
get that.
it's sad to see a kid that is scared to be in their own house because whenever they open the curtain, they see a settler or a soldier.
Yeah.
And they would say it in their own language as children. And then as a culture, the boy need to act tough, but they're not, they're babies. Especially I'm talking about kids. They want to cry, they want to say they're scared.
Yeah.
Even young older people, they feel sometimes guilty when they feel, oh, we're scared. But then they would say, oh, but comparing to what is happening to Gaza. So
Yeah.
it's sad to see people even are feeling guilty about their own fears because some people are in bigger fear.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's sad. It's to see. One thing that occupation did is to make parents really scared in front of their children. And parents are the main, safety and security for kids. They cannot give it to them anymore. This is what they imprint in children's minds.
Yeah. And let me just tell everyone, if you haven't been to Palestine, the children are the most adorable children anywhere. I fell in love with these little kids time and time again. You just bump into them everywhere. And there's kids everywhere that are adorable. I shouldn't say the Palestinian kids are any more adorable, but there's something really tender going on there where you can fall in love pretty easily. And I did. And I appreciate what you're saying about the vulnerability of the kids and what they're exposed to on a daily basis and how traumatic that must be for them. Okay, so last question, Melody, you actually came up with this idea that we should ask about the role of the U.S. Do you want to pose it to Mona?
I just think it's important for people to understand what being supportive of Israel, either in your personal stance, but also in our country being so supportive of Israel. We've gotten to the point in our country now that you can, it's hard to speak up for Palestinian solidarity because the mood of our country is that our government, there's so much, the narrative is really that we're Israel's ally and Israel is right, basically. So, and I know that that's not true, but it's hard to even have some conversations sometimes because of that. So I'd like to talk about, what does having a country like the United States that gives all of its support, including all of our, financial support to Israel, means for the Palestinian people on a daily basis. And because and we heard it when we were there, and you said it, that what's happening in you know, the White House, who's in the White House matters. You know, we heard about Trump several times, you know, while we were on our delegation, and how that is impacting how Palestinians feel about what's the future and probably their daily lives. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I think in history, it always matters who's in the house, but always been way or another the same policy. Is the difference how they put it out. I guess Trump is the most like open and honest about it. Like, we hate you, we don't want you. I don't think anybody stood with the Palestinian history wise. What should happen? It affects the daily life indeed, because it increased the immunity for the Israelis, period. And that means they can do whatever and get the excuses from the US. For me, I guess a lot of talks should happen inside the US around that to be able to support us. And I think other countries, we need to stop thinking that we have another like more than 100 countries out there. We need to actually push our advocacy away from the US at some point, because it's not the only country. I know it's the strongest at the moment, but still we have more other countries that you know, we can advocate with them. But in terms of the US, I think first, that to be honest, I feel sorry for all of you, because now there's no freedom of speech in your country as well. So US people cannot talk to me about democracy anymore. Um,
I
so
wouldn't dare.
So you need to work things out inside your country to be able to support us, and not only us, I guess several oppressed people around the world. Because as soon as Trump came in, there was, you know, the agreement around weapons and new weapons and all that. Nobody talked about it. It was like, oh, okay. Well, those weapons will be used against people in Gaza, and already is against people in the north of the West Bank. It's getting close to the south. So it's clear. And it happened again live on TV. It's not anymore hidden like before. It's openly, we see it, we see everything through different channels. So I guess we need to work harder, all of us together.
So thanks for, you know, saying that about that there are 100 countries that are actually in support of Palestine. We got checked a couple times on our delegation, since there were 4 people from the United States and 1 person from Australia. Like, you all are centering, you know, American politics in our discussions, and it's of course, because we're Americans, it's easy for us to do, but that means we have to work harder to decenter the United States as the only force in the world. So thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, okay, well, let's call it quits. And Mona and your team there and all your loved ones, and we think of you in our hearts all the time now, and we see what's happening in the northern part of the West Bank. And someone, I don't know who it was on the team, but someone said, well, we're just waiting our turn here in Hebron. And I hope that's not true. I hope there's no bombs and tanks rolling through to destroy everything. I know the occupation is bad enough, but it could be worse, and I hope it isn't. And inshallah, that will stop soon.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thanks for your time, and I hope we stay in touch.
Thanks,
course.
Mona.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. Okay, well, that's the end of that interview, and now we can do Q&A. And it's funny, when you're in the interview, you're not maybe as moved as I feel now, having watched ourselves in the interview. Maybe you're moved too, I don't know. But so what questions do you have for myself and Melody? and it can be about that interview or about anything. We were there actually for 3 weeks. The delegation was 2 weeks. We went a little bit beforehand to visit some friends there. So what you can do is raise your hand in the reaction button down below or wherever it is on your interface. And, just raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can ask the question. As always, I guess I'll say, if you have a comment, keep it brief and just pose a question so we can get through whatever you're thinking and we can respond to it. Who has a question? Okay, Moji, go right ahead.
Hi, it's not a question, it's a comment. Does it have to be a question?
Well, in the interest of time, if you would make the comment short, and then we can move on to whatever people have for questions. Go ahead and make a short comment.
Okay. I am from Iran, and so a lot of what, and I'm a retired psychologist. So, I mean, I could see so much sedimented pain in her words that were unspoken. And one of those areas where she smiled when she said people in the US are not don't have freedom of speech now. And she said it with such a painful, traumatized little relish that it reminded me of when I was, along with 100,000 other or 200,000 people were chanting in San Francisco before the US attacked Iraq. We were chanting internal repression, external aggression, internal repression, external aggression. And I was thinking of Dr. Mossadegh of Iran, who was overthrown in 1953 by the CIA and MI6, where he said internal despotism and external colonialism are two sides of the same coin, i.e., they either need one another directly as so-called friends, or they need one another as enemy. So what has happened here with the second coming of Trump, as people say jokingly, we are dealing with internal despotism having come home, where it used to be at the time of Dr. Mossadegh, the people, the lucky global north people, where they had some kind of a democracy just for the privileged global northers. But now that privilege is gone. And so I just wanted to share with you how that pain that was hidden not very deeply underneath her relish, where he said,
Thank you.
you guys are, to the white people in this country, you don't have freedom of speech now.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Moji. Yeah, we felt a little bit of, our own emotions, Melody, you might comment on this too, is, you feel hurt for them when you're there seeing what they live in and under. And, the resilience thing about Palestinians is true, but they must harbor pain inside, as anybody would, living under these circumstances. Nonetheless, they were, like living their lives, trying to be happy, funny. They were often funny. They're very enjoyable to be with. It's not like they're walking around like a bunch of sad sacks, right? But the pain must be there. Melody, did you want to respond to that?
I don't think so. we can move on to
Okay.
Paul.
I see Paul Shannon, your hand's up. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, thanks very much to you two for all you've done over the last month and more, of course. It's just amazing that you would be there at this critical time. And my question is, with what's going on now, is there a sense of doom that this whole area is just going to be taken over completely by Israel? Is there talk about how people will deal with that if if what's going on in Gaza comes to the West Bank? How are people looking at the present moment, and what does the present moment mean for us here in the United States? Do we just, I kind of feel we're watching this catastrophe in the West Bank unfolding and don't really have a strategy for how to deal with that. I wonder if the Palestinians do, or do they just kind of say, well, this is just more of the same and we'll still stay here somehow? I mean, I assume they know that they're going to be moved out of there.
I think there was what has been occurring in Jenin and the other cities in northern West Bank has them particularly worried. The displacement of the 40, between 30 and 40,000 people in Jenin and Tukim really has them worried, I think, because it seems a much closer and much more, the Israeli strategy seems clear to them, I think. I think Mona saying, we are resilient. I mean, that's certainly true. I mean, they are, as you could see just in the story about Al-Khair, the village, they've been dealing with this forever, constantly trying to think of strategies to hold on to their land. I know the Palestinians will have that feeling as well as a sense of doom, because it seems clear with the sort of green light, the open green light from our country's administration, that it basically gives Israel even more immunity and more gives them the green light to do whatever they want. So I think I think both is true. So Ken, I don't know, you want to add something?
Yeah, Paul, I think they know I mean, how can you not know that it's like Mona or somebody, I think it might have been Mona, who said, we're just waiting our turn. They see what's happening in Jenin and Tukaram and, Gaza, they're getting the Gaza treatment, right? The tanks and the bombs are hitting Jenin and these other villages. Yeah, at the same time that I say they're looking at this and thinking, here it comes towards us, they are so determined to not leave. The people out in the countryside, like this group out in Al-Khair, decades, and they don't want to leave. They're determined not to give it up. People in their homes, they're determined to stay. People whose homes are demolished, they go back and build them again. I mean, there's something that there's not going to be if Israel wants to shove them all out, which they do, they want to. I wrote an article and I call it the slow motion ethnic cleansing of the West Bank or of Hebron. They're doing in slow motion what they're doing in fast motion in Gaza, just trying to push them all out, and that's their determination. But if they are intent on doing that, it's not going to come easy. I don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to look tragic one way or another, but I don't know what you say. What can we do? I mean, they do want people to come there. It's not easy to go there. We went in through Jordan. It was easier to go that way than through Tel Aviv, I think. we have this white privilege. It's so true. And we could go in and we could go visit. And we were part of a delegation, but 10 years ago, we went on our own. We had friends there who took care of us and guided us around. But, this idea of accompaniment that CPT does, it's not intervention. You're not going in there to try to take charge of anything. You're going in there to accompany people for what they're going through and witness it and write about it and all that. And, they want that, and they want us to be here talking about it. What we're doing with this webinar is something that is important. So I don't know what all we can do other than raise our voices, and even then, it sometimes feels futile in the face of our own government. Just keep on keeping on, I guess.
So you feel
I
it's a
just
time for, go ahead, Melody.
I was just going to add that there is a movement afoot by organizations that are similar to CPT, the Peace Force. There's been a team of I think 3 people in the West Bank. They were there when we were there. They were there for 5 weeks to try to come up with a strategy to send large groups of people from other countries in at once to try to create a force in the West Bank. And there's also one afoot to do that. And in Gaza, that will probably change since the most recent bombings. But there's certainly people are trying in our country and internationally are trying to come up with a strategy to put a lot of people in the West Bank as accompany, people to accompany, to people to witness, to be there, to see on the ground, to help change the narrative about in our country and other countries about what Israel is doing. So that's something. And if you're interested, we could probably get you information about that.
That's
I just
interesting.
see.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
No, that's good. I mean, that would be similar to the whole idea of the Pledge of Resistance back during the Central America stuff to get enough Americans in Nicaragua to prevent an invasion.
Right.
Yeah.
Similar. And to protect, I think, Palestinians. So yeah.
I just looking in the chat, which I wasn't able to look at when I was showing the interview. Lizzie Earth says accompaniment is a beautiful practice to human beings in respectful solidarity with each other, and I have to say yes, amen to that. Melody and I have done accompaniment like 3 times now. At the border in Arizona with people seeking asylum, and in Minnesota with Line 3. And in every case, we're there because we care. And at the same time that we're giving something, we're receiving a lot back, probably receiving back more than we're giving in terms of, it's uplifting to be with people who are in a struggle and to be with them in that struggle. So, yeah, accompaniment, I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I saw another hand and now it's gone away. So,
Barbara, did you have a question or? It was Barbara Larkham.
okay.
Just ask.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. You're
Okay,
unmuted.
I wasn't allowed to unmute. My question was mostly answered by your recent comments. I was going to ask what are the plans of CPT and any other accompaniment groups? Are they going to continue, or they're still looking for quite a few more people to come to the area if possible?
Yes, and actually, as a matter of fact, if you go to CPT's website and click on, I can't remember what the page is, but if you go to Palestine, they have like 4 more delegations that they'd like to have come, and that's just their organization. As I said, there are many. When I met the people on the ground who were trying to do an assessment of what it was needed and what organizations could do, I was told there were 26 CPT-like organizations in the West Bank, and they were trying to get those organizations together to be a force, so that there could be some sort of coordinated effort. So I think I think CPT would love to have more people come. I think their next one is in June, and then in September. So the one that they have planned. So those are the ways that you can go. I mean, it's a good way to go. I learned a lot that I didn't learn the first time we went when we went by ourselves because they are connected to other organizations. We learned a lot from other organizations and learned a lot about the, different kinds, the forms of resistance and strength that Palestinians undertake, and as well as the everyday that they're dealing with and the struggle that they have every day. So that's certainly one way if you can afford to do that.
Thank you.
Ditto. Go
Mhm.
on a delegation if you can. You not only meet the team, but they get you to meet, people who are going through it. You go to people's homes and they tell you their stories. And so it's a very powerful experience. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I don't see any other hands. We can call it quits.
I
unless
thought
somebody-
Ridgely was waving. Ridgely, where are you? Can you
Oh,
unmute Ridgely? Ridgely's been on some delegations too. Where are you?
Yeah.
Oh, there she is.
I have, and I'm interested. Um, I'm interested in your experience of shoot.
We can hear you. We just can't see you.
Oh no, here.
Oh, there
Okay.
you are.
Um, of being able to get in so easily, uh, and especially because you went early. Um, and so it was the two of you getting in early. My last time I went through Jordan, I thought it was a pain in the neck. It was part of a delegation, but I I'd always gone in through Tel Aviv before, even by myself. And I'm also hearing it's a different way you have to get visas now by mail, which in a way is easier because you're not wasting your money by flying in, getting a ticket. But I guess so you feel like you all, and you haven't even heard of people who've had a hard time getting
No,
in at all.
that's not
just,
true.
okay.
Flying into Amman and getting into the West Bank was a pain, but not because we were stopped and questioned. It was just the process is a pain. You're right. Lots of, levels of checking. And we were glad that we had written descriptions of what you needed to do because that helped a lot. There were 5 of us on the delegation, 4 of us Americans, as I said before, and 1 person from Australia. That 1 person they were in their 30s and they were questioned quite a bit going in. And it's because they had been there 18 months before and had been tagged and rated as a 3, which I don't exactly know what that was. So therefore they were pulled out and questioned for a long time. And we also heard from another young person that we met in Amman who was British, who had the same kind of an experience. Made me wonder whether it was because they were young and because they were had pro, Palestine solidarity in their backgrounds that they could check. I mean, they asked them like where their parents came from. I mean, it was quite specific. We were asked a few questions, but nothing like those 2 people. So probably it was easier that we weren't in a group. We were there. But one of the other delegates was with us, and there were 3 older white people, and we breezed through pretty easily. Yeah, but
maybe not next time.
yeah, maybe not
And
next time.
And I
You never
guess
know.
it depends on the person that you come up to the booth to talk to. I remember in Tel Aviv, we got through 10 years ago and back out again without a lot of hassle. And this time again, but who knows? It's such an uncertain thing.
Yeah, I also, because I was just there in December, I'm wondering how difficult it would be to get in again. Or,
I think it has something to do with how much they track where you went and what checkpoints you went through, is what we were told. And we weren't really in country, we weren't really checked that much. So we're probably fairly safe to go back in. I think they looked at my passport one time when we were inside the country. So
Mhm.
I doubt, we could probably get back in.
Did anybody ever talk about the Palestinian Authority at all?
Oh, yeah.
They
Oh,
did.
yeah, there's no love lost. They really see the PA as a collaborating government. I mean, they are. And they're, oh, yeah, nobody likes the PA that we talk to. They're in the same boat as the IOF.
Yep. Just,
Yeah.
And which meant that the Palestinians don't feel like they have a voice in the international, and then there's no one representing them. Yeah.
mhm.
Thanks for your questions.
Thank you, Ridgely. It's nice to see your face.
Oh, it's so good to see you all too.
Anybody else with a question or anything? All right, well, that's been a long evening. It's almost an hour and a half we've been here, and I appreciate you all hanging in. And I put my email in the chat there if anybody wants to write a direct question to me, or or you can get the melody through me if you like. And just so you know, I kept a blog while I was there every evening. And then when I came back, I wrote an article about having gone there. And the article found its way on a number of online services, including Mass Peace Action's newsletter. Thank you very much, Brian and Paul. And but it's also on Consortium News and Counterpunch and a number of other places. So if you go to one of those places and you Google my name, you'll find the article that I wrote about it. And in the article is a link to my blog that I kept every day if you want to get more detailed and, sort of a daily experience of what it was like to be there.
I'd like to say
Okay.
just one more thing. It's sort of answering the question, what we can do. One of the things that is interesting is that there are many initiatives in Palestine, or small forms of what I call resistance, and a lot of them have to do with small organizations or individuals either starting businesses or having some really interesting projects. All of those things could be supported. And I will just give you one example. I'll try to do it quick. On our last day in Jerusalem, we had a tour of Silwan, which is a small Palestinian section of East Jerusalem, and we had a tour by two artists from the organization's Eyewitness Silwan, and they have a really amazing project where they're painting sets of eyes on houses in Silwan. And you can go on their website, and like I said, it's that letter I, Witness Silwan, I think .org, I think. But if you could just put in Eyewitness Silwan, and see the amazing pictures of the amazing work they're doing of painting watching eyes. And they have famous people like George Floyd and Malcolm X, and then they have famous Palestinians as well, and martyrs and poets. And it's a very interesting, really cool project. And projects like that could use our support. They have things for sale and etc. So, just take a look. And if you're really interested, you could email Ken and me, and we could send you some, possibilities of ways to support either small businesses trying to get their feet on the ground or interesting projects that Palestinians are leading.
Yeah, and last word is that whenever I post something on Facebook about Palestine, there's this one person who always comments BDS! Exclamation point. We got the best in sanction. And so that's one thing that we can do is boycott Israeli companies and spend money with Palestinians. So it's small, but if enough of us do it, it amounts to something. All right, good friends. Thank you all for being here. And
Thanks
yeah,
for coming.
and free Palestine, right? Good night, everybody.